They returned this dog to the shelter for being too big. You won't believe what happened next. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? I love seeing how far our stories travel. The day had started with excitement, at least for him. Max, a 3-year-old German Shepherd mix, loved car rides. He sat in the back seat, his tongue hanging out, tail wagging, eyes bright with trust. He didn't know where they were going, but he knew his family was with him. That was all that mattered. When the car stopped, he leapt out, ready for adventure. The familiar scent of the shelter hit his nose, but he didn't think much of it at first. Maybe they were visiting. Maybe it was just a quick stop. He followed them inside, tail swaying. But then he saw the papers, heard the words, "Too big, can't handle him anymore." The cheerful thump of his tail slowed. His ears tilted back. He looked from face to face, trying to understand. A staff member clipped on a leash. His family's hands didn't reach down to pet him. No gentle goodbye, no lingering hug. Just gone. As the door closed behind them, Max sat in the middle of the kennel, staring after them. His tail stopped moving. The sound of the latch echoed louder than any bark. That's the moment he realized they weren't coming back. The shelter was a place of second chances, but for Max, it felt like the end. The air carried a mix of disinfectant, nervous panting, and the sharp echo of barking that never seemed to stop. Every sound made him flinch. Every face that passed by wasn't the one he was looking for. Days blurred together. In the mornings, staff brought food, but Max often just sniffed it before lying back down. His once bright eyes seemed clouded now, dulled by confusion. The kennel felt smaller every day, the concrete floor cold against his paws. He would press his head against the bars whenever footsteps approached, just in case it was someone for him. But each time, they walked past, sometimes glancing, sometimes not even noticing. Still, there were moments of quiet. A soft voice here, a gentle pat there. Volunteers tried to coax him into play, but Max would only wag his tail half-heartedly. The joy he once carried seemed locked away. One afternoon, as he lay curled in the corner, a shadow fell across his kennel. A pair of eyes met his, not with pity, but with curiosity. And that's when everything began to change. Her name was Sarah, a shelter volunteer who always stayed a little longer than her shift required. That afternoon, she knelt by Max's kennel, speaking softly. Her voice carried no rush, no forced cheer, just patience. Max lifted his head, studying her. She didn't reach for him immediately. She simply sat there, letting him decide. Over the next few days, Sarah kept coming back. She brought him out into the quiet yard, away from the chaos. At first, Max followed cautiously, ears flicking at every sound. But Sarah noticed something remarkable. When another dog whined from across the fence, Max's head turned sharply. He approached, slow and deliberate, pressing his nose gently against the chain link, as if to comfort the other dog. It happened again the next day with a frightened puppy. He lay down beside the small kennel, silent but steady, until the trembling eased. Sarah's heart stirred. This wasn't just a big dog who needed a home. This was a soul tuned to the emotions of those around him. That evening, as she locked up, Sarah made a call. Her voice was low, but her words carried hope. "I think I've found the one you're looking for." 2 days later, a man walked into the shelter. His stride was steady, but there was a heaviness in his eyes, the kind that comes from carrying something invisible. Sarah greeted him warmly. "You must be David," she said. He nodded, glancing around at the rows of kennels. When they reached Max, the dog was lying quietly, head resting on his paws. But the moment their eyes met, something shifted. Max stood, ears perked, tail low but wagging gently. "This is him?" David asked, his voice cautious. Sarah smiled. "This is Max." David stepped inside the kennel slowly, kneeling to meet him at eye level. Max didn't jump or bark. Instead, he approached in a calm, deliberate way, pressing his head lightly into David's chest. There was a flicker in David's expression, surprise, maybe even relief. "He's different," he murmured. Sarah hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to spend some time with him outside?" David agreed, and together they walked to the quiet yard. As Max trotted alongside him, their steps began to fall into sync. Then David glanced at Sarah and said something that made her pulse quicken. "Do you mind if I test him for something?" Sarah nodded, curious. David crouched down in the grass while Max watched him intently. Then, without warning, David dropped. His gaze, shoulders slumping as if in sudden distress. His breathing changed, shallow, uneven. Max's reaction was instant. He stepped forward, nudging David's arm with his nose, then pressing his head firmly against his chest. When David didn't respond, Max let out a low whine and pawed at his knee, refusing to leave his side. David's eyes flicked up to Sarah. Most dogs would just wait. He's checking on me. Next, David slowly lay on his back, closing his eyes. Max immediately circled him once, then lowered himself down so his body was against David's, warm and protective. Sarah felt her throat tighten. He's not just reading your body language, he's feeling your emotions. David sat up, running a hand through Max's fur. The dog leaned into him, calm but alert, as if to say, "I've got you." For a moment, the yard was silent except for the sound of Max's steady breathing. Then David smiled for the first time that day. A small, certain smile. "I think," he said quietly, "I've found him." Adoption day came quickly. The paperwork was signed, but the moment felt bigger than a transaction. It felt like a turning point. Sarah knelt beside Max one last time, her hands buried in his fur. "You're going to do great things," she whispered, blinking back tears. Max licked her hand gently, as if he understood. David stood nearby, holding the leash. He looked more at ease than the day they met, though his eyes still carried a weight. "I never told you," he said to Sarah. "I've been struggling since I came back from deployment. Anxiety, nightmares, the works. I was looking for a service dog, but honestly, I think he found me instead." They walked out together, Max's paws tapping against the shelter floor for the last time. Outside, the sun bathed them in gold, and Max lifted his head, sniffing the air as if he already knew he was homebound. When they reached David's house, Max stepped inside without hesitation, tail swaying. He sniffed each room, taking in the new scents. But then he paused in the hallway, ears pricking toward a closed door. Something inside had caught his attention, and David looked suddenly uneasy. David froze, following Max's gaze toward the closed door. "That's my bedroom," he said slowly, but Max didn't move. Instead, he stepped forward, pawing at the door and whining low in his throat. David hesitated before opening it. The moment the door swung wide, Max darted inside and stopped at the bedside table. His nose pressed against a small device. David's medical alert monitor. It was flashing red. Confused, David picked it up, and that's when it hit him. His heart rate was spiking. His chest tightened. Dizziness swept over him in a wave. Max reacted instantly. He pressed himself against David's legs, guiding him toward the bed. Then he leapt onto it, positioning himself so David was propped against his warm body. Max's eyes stayed locked on him, steady and unblinking. David's hands trembled. As he reached for his phone, he managed to call for help, his voice weak but audible. When the paramedics arrived minutes later, one of them glanced at Max in amazement. "If he hadn't alerted you and kept you still," the medic said, "this could have ended differently." David looked at Max, tears stinging his eyes. "You didn't just find me," he whispered. "You saved me." David's hands still shook hours later, but not from fear, from the overwhelming realization of what had just happened. That night, he posted the full story online. How a dog returned for being too big had, in less than a week, saved his life. He included a photo of Max lying faithfully by his side, eyes calm, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. The response was instant. Thousands of comments poured in. "This is why you never judge a dog by size. Max is a hero." That family made the biggest mistake of their lives. News outlets picked it up. The shelter staff beamed with pride, and Sarah's phone lit up with messages. She couldn't stop smiling. Somewhere in the flood of responses, there was a short, quiet message from an account David didn't recognize. "We're glad he's found where he belongs." No name, but he knew. David closed the laptop and looked at Max, who was sprawled comfortably across the couch. "You're not just a service dog," he said softly. "You're family." Max's tail thumped against the cushion. His size had been the reason they gave him up, but now, it was clear. He was exactly the right fit.